We're a little early, so we can make some meaningful small talk before we get started here. We're going to be actually opening tonight with a meditation that might be surprising, which is one in which we're going to turn towards joy because we need it and it's important. And one of the ways we're going to turn towards joy is through memory and imagination. So I would love to start crowdsourcing some joy memories here. This can be the form of delight. This can be kind of a rejoicing, momentary sensory experience, or something more meaningful. So any joy memories as we move in? Anything recently, like today? Yes, Brian. Yeah.
I saw my friend who she just recovered from illness.
Mm.
And she was dancing and she was smiling.
Oh. Love it.
So much joy for her and with her.
Beautiful. I'll repeat it for folks if they couldn't hear, which was connecting with a friend who's recovering from an illness and to see them dancing and enjoying and rejoicing in life. What a treat. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah. And the cool thing, I know that we're all familiar probably at this point with the reality that difficult emotions are contagious, like fear and despair and overwhelm. But so, like hearing Brian share, like there's a contagion also with our joyful emotions. Any other? Yes, that gave me joy. Thanks, Melinda. Yeah, let's use the mic. Good call. That was Connie.
We want everybody to share what you're doing. I don't know if anyone's seen them, but they have baby owls on Bernal Hill. There's
I've
two
heard.
babies, and they're just so cute, and they're sitting close together. They were sitting close together today, really high, and their mom was nearby. And I don't know where the dad was, but anyway, I just love that they're there.
Flying now.
Do you think
They're flying now. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the baby owls, source of delight and joy. I had the good fortune to go see the poet Ross Gay last Friday. He gave a presentation in San Francisco, and he wrote a book 5 years ago that was an entire year, every day, writing an essay on delight. And he's not a Buddhist, but there's so much that he describes that resonates with this practice of cultivation of joy. And he just came out with a new book called More Delight. And he just takes the everyday and the mundane and finds the delight in it. And one thing he describes in it very clearly and beautifully is he's not pushing away or denying or negating what's hard. It's still there. But there's actually a more realistic, and you could almost say more wisdom-informed view to see also the delight that is there. And he makes that such a deliberate practice. And it's such a beautiful way of approaching, of course, the everyday. And there's so much kind of overlap there with a gratitude practice. But the delight, it has this kind of quality, I feel like, of surprise with it, not just enjoyment, just this kind of unexpected feeling of happiness. So that simple sense of delight that really we can kind of harvest far more than we do. And some folks might remember when we did the event here, we did a screening of the Book of Joy, which is the book that the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu did together. And that book and the film, it really highlights the choice of being joyful, the choice of deciding to include joy and actually, as the way they describe it, make joy an everyday, kind of practice and stance with the world. And they're coming from different worldviews, right? His Holiness the Dalai Lama is coming from a worldview in which, we choose and turn towards joy, largely in order for our heart to lift so we can keep doing the work of a bodhisattva, And our heart also turns towards joy because we recognize just the goodness in all other beings. So it's a wisdom practice, it's an insight practice. It's not just kind of a, temporary pleasure seeking. Oh, things are hard, I just want to feel good. No, it's actually quite this radical way of seeing. Whereas Archbishop Desmond Tutu beautifully says that choosing to see the joy, irrespective of outside circumstances, is a radical act akin to social justice. Because actually social justice is a way of seeing the world with love. And as many of you know, in both cases, these world leaders, these world spiritual leaders, now, of course, Archbishop Desmond Tutu has passed on to whatever I hope is his version of the best next life or heaven. But these world leaders, they've both lived through unbelievable trauma and oppression politically. Desmond Tutu, of course, in the apartheid in South Africa, His Holiness the Dalai Lama through the invasion and then his own exile from Tibet. So they've seen a lot of political turmoil. They kind of know what this is all about, this feeling of helplessness and hopelessness and overwhelm and not knowing and, difficulty of, especially what next? What next? And they choose and they cultivate joy. And so I think it's a beautiful thing to resonate with. And our small groups and the dedicated practice group, it just happens to be that this month will be the month we focus on happiness and joy. And we happen to reach the chapter, so it's all aligned here, that's dedicated to the paramita of joyful enthusiasm, sometimes called heroic perseverance. So a paramita is one of these spiritual qualities that helps us wake up on the path, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But I kind of love the joyful enthusiasm, because that is what's needed to keep going, to keep our practice going, and to remember why we are doing what we're doing. It's not just, we got to keep meditating, we got to keep having compassion because it's so important, because things are so hard and they're going to get worse. All that is true. But if you can kind of source or resource that enthusiasm with just the joy we get to practice, we get these teachings, we get to practice together. That joyful enthusiasm is just such a good source of energy, such a good source of energy. So tonight we're going to do a meditation where we kind of start at different ways, going through different ways of cultivating, gathering, and as we say in the CEB or cultivating emotional balance practice, harvesting joy. So we'll start with the joy that we can experience through the breath, just that simple pleasure of the breath. And then we will also I love that everybody just breathes when I say, it is quite joyful. And we'll also do a practice using memory and imagination. So we were sourcing a little bit of these kind of daily delights. And by savoring and really kind of calling in this remembering of what's joyful, it has almost like a triple effect. One, by recalling it now, we get to feel the joy again. And then two, when we recall it now, we actually extend and expand the joy we felt the first time. Right? So I noticed today, these trees on Folsom, they lose all their leaves, and then it seems like all of a sudden they're all back in. And just with this wind, dancing in the light and in the wind, just that simple delight. I would have not probably remembered it not doing this practice, but doing the practice, I then get to extend and expand the rejoicing in it, and it's more likely that it'll actually get put into my memory as something that has to do with today. Our memory and how we remember our days is something we can actually practice. Needless to say, we have a bias towards what's most recent and also what's most salient, which is often negative. But we can counteract that negative bias of how was your day? Hard. Because we're thinking about what was the biggest thing. But if we really give ourselves that challenge of what was delightful today, we have a different day. We literally are not only changing the present moment, we're changing what will become our past. Super transformative joy practice. But because it's funny, you know, like coming up here and being like, we're gonna meditate on joy. And you guys could be like, hello, did you read the news? Have you seen what's happening? Or like if in our own life there's difficulties for ourselves or people we love, it can feel like, is this really the time to do it? So I love linking this joy practice as almost a sense of mental hygiene. Like, how do we keep ourselves kind of limber? You know, how do we keep ourselves away from catastrophizing, negative rumination? You know, there's a lot of challenges to overcome to let that joy really permeate. And then, you know, I'll just say one more thing as hopefully inspiration, which is, you know, according to the Buddhist cosmology and many others, joy, yes, we can find it from the outside world, but it's really a reflection of our own qualities, like our basic goodness, that happiness without reason. Sokni Rinpoche talks about just for a moment feeling the goodness that we are. And so the last part of our practice will be not just the delights of the day, but that rejoicing in the goodness of others, their good qualities. You know, what they do in the world that's, you know, of benefit. So this could be, you know, very easy to choose His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Bishop Desmond Tutu. And it could also be someone in our life. They don't have to be, you know, always exhibiting those great qualities. Maybe sometimes they're cranky or otherwise, but when we rejoice in the goodness or the quality of another being, that's a different kind of rejoicing that we get to practice. So 3 types of joy, 3 ways. You in? Yeah. I found kind of doing this practice is just such good nourishment for us. So let's take a moment. I see a couple new faces, so just welcome to the San Francisco Dharma Collective. I'm Eve, and we will have this meditation maybe about 30 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we'll do some question and answer and talk more on the theme of heroic perseverance. And just so you all know, if you're new to the center, sometimes we get a lot of support from the outside in terms of interruptive activities and sound. No problem, we can make it part of our practice, but just know we have Sarana at the door here, so we are safe and taken care of. We can really just relax into being here. And if it is your first time and you want to take a moment to just take in the place, you know, recognizing where you are, kind of looking around the room, there will be time to get, or you can take your time to get tea or use the bathroom after the meditation. But otherwise, let's give ourselves a really strong foundation for practice by establishing a solid posture. And so feeling yourself supported, whether cross-legged or seated. Inviting that stable base from the sits bones through the belly. Inviting a suppleness and uprightness through the spine. And so beautiful, we have the lilies in bloom, these calla lilies all over. And just that long, slender spine that's upright, but also just has that natural sense of lifting towards the light. Feel or imagine our own spine lifting up towards the light. Finding a place where the shoulders can feel at ease. So that could be the hands folded together in the lap or placed upon the knees. And establish a sense of connection wherever the hands are. Make it deliberate, recognizing this is such an important balancing piece of our posture. Noticing where the head is resting on top of the neck, and seeing if you can imagine as though there's just a little bit of a gaze downward, and maybe even the chin just slightly pointed downwards. And maybe more as an internal posture, feeling a sense of the chest lifting upwards towards the ceiling, almost as though the heart was raised upward. And then softening through the eyes and the jaw. Softening and finding warmth in the chest. Softening and releasing through the belly. And one more time, softening through the eyes and the jaw. Softening through the chest and the belly. And while it can be quite enjoyable to feel that sense of ease and relaxation, also find that sense of vividness and brightness. As we inhale, inviting that vividness and brightness. As we exhale, gently relaxing, releasing, softening. And continue balancing in this way. Inhale, noticing all the sensations of breath. And then exhale, releasing that attention, but still following the whole breath through the exhale. And starting again as though it were the very first breath you were ever noticing. And when inevitably the mind drifts away, gets distracted, caught up in memory or planning or image, just relax, release, and then return, this close attending to the breath. And while still attending to the breath, maybe finding an anchor at the belly, noticing the rise and fall of the breath, or possibly the subtle sensations at the nostrils of the breath traveling in and out. Or noticing the whole body as it's breathing. And just choose one, either the belly, the nostrils, or the whole body. And as you breathe in, see what you can notice in the breath that feels pleasurable, enjoyable. And as you breathe out, simply sustaining that sense of whatever is enjoyable about the breath. This could be such a subtle form of enjoyment. Maybe just the sense of release when we exhale. Maybe a softness in the face. Whatever you can notice and harvest the joy, the enjoyment of in the breath. Let's keep attending there. And when you next noticed that your mind has been carried away, again relaxing, releasing, and then see if you can even sense the rejoicing of coming home to the breath. Can we sense just the goodness, the joy, the pleasure of being in this present moment, fully here with our breath? Just a couple more moments here, allowing ourselves to harvest whatever enjoyment we can experience through simply breathing and returning to the breath over and over. And gently shifting our attention awareness from the breath to the mind and imagination. And taking a moment to bring to mind something which created a sense of delight, a moment of joy. This could be something quite simple, like seeing the sunlight in a particular way through the trees, seeing the happy face of a small child making its way down the street with a loving parent close behind. This could be one of our delightful fur beings living their best life, running in the grass or laying on the couch. Something simple and easy, and letting the memory of it come to the very forefront. Noticing how it feels in the body as we recall and savor this joy or delight. Letting the body, heart, and mind feel the nourishment of resting our mind in delight. Letting the memory or image go, and for a couple moments, just feeling those sensations, whatever is palpable, noticeable in the body. Maybe there's a sense of warmth or expansion, maybe even a smile at the mouth or a feeling of a smile at the heart. If it's hard to recall or remember or hold on to this feeling, no problem. Just continue imagining what it's like to bring ourselves close to this memory or savoring of enjoyment. Now giving ourselves a moment to bring once again to the mind and imagination the image of a being with whom we feel a great sense of rejoicing. Maybe there's a sense of admiring their compassion or their kindness, some aspect of the goodness that they bring to the world. This could be someone we know well or someone we knew in our past. This could be someone we've never met, but we have read about or know about. Just choose one person. Doesn't have to be the perfect choice, just any being who we rejoice in their goodness. Imagine them smiling here, present here. As though they were seated in front of you or nearby. And imagine the qualities that they have that allow them to bring goodness. And again, let the heart be lifted or gladdened by the goodness this being has brought not only to you, but likely many other beings. And let the mind rest here. Considering or imagining these qualities that this being brings into the world. And bring to mind the possibility that these qualities also exist within us. Maybe not in the same way, but is there something within us that also radiates this goodness? Again, noticing the sensations of the body and considering whether we can feel almost like a lantern illuminating the space around us with some of our rejoicing, some of our goodness, our inner gold. Seeing if we can touch, even for a couple moments, the sense of our goodness, the qualities in us that also create a sense of compassion or kindness. And letting this be a doorway to rejoicing in the goodness of all beings, not just those we admire or look up to, not just us. That all beings have this potential for the goodness. All beings could become like this lantern, illuminating the space around them with warmth and care, kindness and love. For a couple moments, just feel, sense, or imagine being in this field of illuminated beings, lit up by their goodness. And then coming back to the breath, reconnecting to the breath and the body. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your practice. So we have some time now to reflect and connect together. And to do so, as we come together every week, we do so as a beautiful representation of living in community and with compassion. And in order to do that, we really have to kind of hold ourselves internally to this, another of the beautiful paramitas, which is sila, or ethics. And that ethics is of profound non-harming. Non-harming in our body, meaning what we're physically doing. So not taking up too much space in your seat, or knocking someone over, but I don't think anyone's going to do that. non-harming in your speech, so what you're sharing in the room. Also non-harming in the mind, maybe the judgments that might arise as we listen to other people and hear them speak. So we kind of engage in this practice of sangha, this practice of ethics or sila within that. It's a really important piece of being able to come here together. So that means that we are attending closely to what we're saying, attending closely to what we're sharing with others, and to do the most beneficial and cause the least harm. How does that sound to folks? Great. And, you know, we're always looking for ways to make people feel more supported in this space. So if there are suggestions, we would love to hear them. You can email us, you can send a note, you can chat with the folks here who are volunteers. Sarana's here tonight, myself, Mace, many others. So with that, for folks in the room, so that everybody online can hear us, please use the mic. And for folks at home, just simply raise your hand. Any reflections or questions on that practice? Any joy cultivated? Yes, please. Do you mind? Thank you.
You know, like how sometimes when you're walking down the street and you see a kid and they're just bursting with joy for no apparent reason? See, Jimmy and I were walking down 22nd Street, and these two little kids, girls, maybe about 3, they don't see each other a lot. They saw each other, and one of the kids just starts jumping up and down, just jumping up and down with joy. And as I got closer, something told me I too should jump. And I just started to jump for joy just to see what that felt like, because I didn't really remember what it would be like to jump for joy for no apparent reason. It was just a sweet moment. It was fantastic, actually. I didn't have to jump long. And I looked over at Jimmy to see if he was embarrassed. And he wasn't. He was smiling from like ear to ear.
Oh.
And then the moment just evaporates away, and we continue down the street. And it was just great. So thank you, Jumping for Joy Child, who I never met.
Oh. And then you brought that into practice, the memory too?
Yeah, well, when you were talking about, I brought that into the practice, and it was just really sweet to just sit in the fullness of it. It's kind of like what you said, like the memory of it just intensified it. And now it was a moment that just evaporated so quickly. It was barely, 3 seconds. But now to have recalled it, it's lodged in me. Yes. And I just want to give you gratitude for that, because it was so much. In some ways, it was more delicious to actually remember it than it was to jump.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
I feel that my head is so clean from the inside. It's like if I went to wash it, and they wash it very well, and it's empty. It's such a good feeling, because you're always thinking in what I have to do, and if I write down this or that, and suddenly to be clean in your head without any thought, without any future, without any looking for anything.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eve.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, such a rare and precious feeling to have that sense of just being fully present here. And I imagine it is joyful. Yeah, that clean feeling, not so weighed down, not so encumbered by kind of the ruminations and the planning and wonderful. Thank you. Oh, great. Oh, hey, Jason.
Hi. I just felt this memory coming that was of a place. And I did this Bernal Heights walk that was a stair walk this weekend. And I discovered a street called Joy. And it's not a street. It's actually just a stairway. and the houses are on either side of it, like it's a street. And it was so fun because like it just was a lovely discovery. It was just brimming with flowers and cool little houses and people just nestled in this spot that was just so like comforting and joyous as a place. And I felt this joy about discovering it. And then the sign at the top of the stairs you go down said joy, and it was the end. And somebody had crossed out the D and said enjoy. It was just like it was just so like everything about it was just beautiful. And I feel like that joy can be a place if where I've experienced that joy, and it all sort of just came together as like, yeah, that's a great memory that made my day, and it continues to make my day. Just to think,
Beautiful. Yeah, and I love you describing in some ways like the rich layered texture, right? If we're really paying attention closely. Because there's, in some ways, and I don't know if this is your experience jumping up and down, but like in some ways when we're feeling joy, it's almost so overwhelming, we're like not even there, and it's the reflection that we really can like harvest all the kind of notes of it, like, oh wow, there was this and that, and as you're describing it. And that is, we can, the classic teaching of the Buddha, like if you want to know what your mind is going to be like in the future, look at your mind right now. And what are we, moving through with our mind? What are we replaying? Like jumping for joy or finding a joy stairwell, that's, again, not to kind of tip over into toxic positivity of like, I just gotta feel good all the time, right? And this is where, contemporary positive psychology sometimes got misinterpreted to be what's really important is that we feel good and we continue to find ways to feel good. In some ways, positive psychology focuses a bit, not all of it, but some of it a bit much on those temporary states of enjoyment, and then also a really self-oriented way. And it's really wonderful to feel joy, to find a staircase of joy, to jump up and down with joy. However, it's really good when it's fuel for the fire of awakening, right? Like joy, just that hedonic pleasure is a little bit less of a kind of sustainable and grounded. Because some of our states of joy can be kind of dissociative, right? We're not even there. We're just like so much. Yes, Victor. Hello.
Hi, how are you all? Um, well, I'm glad you brought up the practice of being grateful or feeling joyful about something. And many things came to mind. Like I remember one time seeing a, a mother and a child, maybe the child being 10, 11 years old, and then they kissed each other. I saw that in Mexico, and it was just like the purity of the feeling, like the sincerity of the emotion between them,
Yeah.
and that
So,
that was great. But and so many things came to mind. Another one is that you may be having a day and you may be thinking that, well, what can I feel joyful about if I don't feel like it? But I think the
yeah.
practice of doing what we're doing today, it just really helped me switch my train of thought, and think like, no, I can find joy if I make time for it. And
Yeah.
lastly, lately I've been watching occasionally the show of people in the spectrum. I don't know if you guys have seen the show where people have ADHD, and they are looking for love. And so the show is about seeing them going on dates, and just to see how sincere they are about their feelings, regardless of the age. Occasionally, when I see the show, it just makes me think that how powerful the human emotion can be before life changes us through negative experiences. And that's all I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's an interesting one, that last one of like regaining that kind of purity or innocence, but not as in naive, just as in unencumbered, right? Like how do we, joy does feel like childlike. And there's a wisdom to the child, and we can kind of mature that, freshness to the world. I mean, we need to, because it's so easy to get stuck in our grievances, right? And our difficulties. So, yeah, beautiful. Any other reflections or questions? It's okay if the practice was just hard and didn't feel good. Also, no problem. Yes.
I'm very joyful hearing everybody's joyful experience for sure. But so you mentioned at the beginning, like heroic perseverance. If you can talk a little bit more about a heroic aspect, like would that kind of like, so just like a struggle of some sort? And I know other teacher define it as like joyous perseverance.
Yeah, yeah.
Joyful perseverance. So yeah.
Yeah,
you can talk a
that's
bit
what we're
more
getting
about
into next.
it. Oh, okay.
Deep dive into that. Yeah. But did you feel joy in your own practice, Andre?
Yes.
Good. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and there's a couple things I want folks to reflect on tonight too, so we'll save a little time for that. So, yeah, I'm going to read just a little intro from Pema Chödrön here. So we're making our way through this text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, 8th century text with commentary by Pema Chödrön. And we've made it past the first two aspects of the book, the first two aspects, why bodhicitta is awesome. And then the second, how to practice it, which, you could just kind of encapsulate as in tame your wild ass mind with patience, learn distress tolerance, right? If you can't be with a difficult emotion, you have no hope of overcoming like those rampant feelings of rumination, anxiety, frustration, otherwise. We really have to learn how to be with and ride out our difficult, distressing emotions, whether they're envy or contempt or rage or fear, with patience. God, it's a real hard chapter, a real hard part of the book. And now we're kind of on to how to sustain. How to sustain, yeah.
You said ruminative. I'll be brief.
Okay.
People online can't hear us if we
Yeah.
don't use that. That's why we do it.
Didn't mean to stop your speech.
Yeah.
But you said rumination a couple times, and I'm just thinking, are you saying it's akin to self-doubt or?
Yeah, very good question. Rumination, interestingly, it's a word that's also used, I know I've mentioned this, but for how cows chew, right? So there's this like repetitive nature. So, in this book, they talk about both kleshas and shempa. And shempa is a lot more like the ruminative quality. Kleshas would be like, I'm frustrated that they canceled funding for the National Endowments of the Art, right? That's like that momentary. The ruminative quality of it, what are these people thinking? What's wrong with, why did it, like kind of really making a story and getting stuck
Turning to that thought.
over and over?
It presents, you don't choose it, it chooses you.
That's a good question. Different people who look at theories of mind would have a different answer for that. Indeed, it feels habitual, but you still have a choice. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Like the hope is that there is a choice, but it is a really hard one to choose. Because sometimes, I'd have to actually say very often, the habits of mind, the places where we get stuck in rumination, are really imprints from earlier parts of our life. And those are really hard. Those are really sticky. It's as though we lose like all of I'll talk about this in a moment, but we lose all sense of our tools, our capacity, our goodness, our own goodness. So that's really, really tricky. So she says, the paramita of enthusiasm works like a miracle ingredient that brings eagerness to all that we do. What the Bodhisattva commits to is not a trivial matter. Without enthusiasm, we might push too hard or give up altogether. As the Zen master Suzuki Roshi put it, what we're doing here is so important, we had better not take it too seriously. the key to finding this balance between not too tight and not too loose, not too zealous and not too laid back. And so with these paramitas, enthusiasm or this kind of heroic perseverance, this is considered the fuel or the energy for all others. And the other paramitas, are generosity or dana, right? Our generous heart, our ability to give, our desire and aspiration to kind of be of service. Then as I mentioned earlier, sila is our ethical discipline towards non-harming. Then there's patience, which I've mentioned many times, our ability to not react, our ability to kind of take that bigger view. And then this joyful effort, virya, joyful effort, enthusiasm, heroic perseverance. It has a number of different definitions. And interestingly, in some forms of Buddhism, it's called diligence, which does not have the same ring. Diligence, joyful enthusiasm, right? Joyful enthusiasm. And then meditative concentration, that's another paramita. So our ability to sustain our shamatha. And all of these paramitas are covered in these chapters. So there's a big piece on attentiveness, being able to sustain and maintain our focus in one place deliberately. We really cannot progress on the path without that, period. And unfortunately, we live in a time where I think the battle for our attention has never been greater. And it is very hard for us to cultivate, sustain, and maintain that ability to place our attention over and over and over back in one place. And I have not seen anywhere evidence that anything can do that for you. There's no shortcut. I don't know if anybody saw in the New York Times this huge expose on ADHD medications, in which they discovered that the majority of the medications, they help people's behaviors improve, but not actually their performance. So this was looking at educational outcomes for kids. And not saying, all of our attention is, maintaining all of our attention will improve all of our outcomes in educational testing sites, but my strong hunch is yes. And the early, research that did look at shamatha and ADHD, it's really hard because there's a tricky thing that in the whole beautiful range and spectrum of how people are neurodivergent, there are some types where sitting in meditation is just impossible. It feels unpleasant, unwelcome, not good, right? But for all of us who can manage to sit here, no one here has it easy. No one sits down to meditate. Well, maybe Sylvia, possibly. But most of us do not have it easy. We don't just sit down and feel like my mind is clear. For all of us, it's training, right? And that training, that ongoing development, it's just essential. We can't jump over it a step. We can't just, go on a run or do yoga, like wonderful movement practices, not the same as cultivating that stillness and that silence. Sorry, I just went off on that one. That's patience. So generosity, discipline, patience, joyful effort, meditative concentration, and then wisdom, right? The prajna paramita. And this wisdom of really seeing things clearly as they are, really seeing the ongoing shift and change and fluctuation of everything in this life and the interdependence of everything in this life. And to see that is to really touch probably like the true tears of joy. As we recognize these things that we love so much, they will all change, right? These things that are so painful, they will all change. That's this kind of true wisdom. So when we look specifically at this paramita of joyful enthusiasm, this diligence, this effort, it's especially important in the Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions where this dedication, so the Bodhisattva activity of dedicating oneself and one practice so that we may liberate all beings is so prominent. Like one of the most important reasons to have this joyful enthusiasm, just as Pema Chödrön just said, is because what we're trying to do is really hard. it's really hard, right? In order to, not give up on ourselves, essentially, and not give up on the work, there has to be this, this real commitment. And I love, we talked about this maybe a month or two back, but this idea of the mind of hope and fear. Some of you familiar with Buddhist practice, it's a very common way of describing how we get caught over and over and over and lose sense of our own joy, our own goodness, lose sense of the path, lose sense of, the wisdom and the insight. And so she says, the trick is not getting caught in hope and fear. We can put our whole heart into whatever we do, but if we freeze our attitude into for or against, we're setting ourselves up for stress. Instead, we just go forward with curiosity, wondering where this experience will lead. This kind of open-ended inquisitiveness captures the spirit of enthusiasm or heroic perseverance. So this beautiful, this open-ended inquisitiveness, this kind of curiosity, that's a different way of meeting what happens in life instead of, I really don't want this to happen, or I really need this to happen to be okay. For example, I really want to get this job. Like, I need this job. I'm not feeling secure in my current work. I have to, if I don't get it, everything is going to go wrong. And it's not as though we don't need a job. If you don't, I bow to you. That's awesome. Most of us, and we need a job. We need to support ourselves. And we can do that with this kind of fixed and tight way of imagining and considering, or with this curiosity. Like, we can bring this joyful enthusiasm to anything that arises in the mind. So, okay, I really hope I get this job because it would make a big difference in my life. I wonder what it will be like if I get it, but I also wonder what it will be like if I don't get it, right? And it's not as though we don't care, we're not aloof, but we are kind of bringing that interest, that curiosity, instead of the catastrophizing, like no matter what, it'll be terrible if it doesn't happen. So then the first stanza here from Shanti Deva, thus with patience I will bravely persevere. Through zeal it is that I shall reach enlightenment. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs, and neither is there merit without perseverance. So this idea that the joyful enthusiasm, this inquisitiveness, this curiosity, it's like a wind. It's like a wind that can blow the sails of us, of our vessel towards enlightenment. And if that word enlightenment feels uncomfortable, just think, how can I make my way towards being less of a pain in the ass to the people who love me? Right? That's right along the way. So with patience, I shall bravely persevere. Through zeal it is that I shall reach enlightenment. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs. There is no merit without perseverance. Meaning we can't continue to generate and improve what we can offer to the world if we are not persevering, right? Heroic perseverance means delight in virtue. Its contrary may be defined as laziness, an inclination for unwholesome ways, despondencies, and self-contempt. So we're going to get into these three forms of laziness here, do a little also self-confessional moments of our favorite forms of laziness that could get in the way of our perseverance. But I love this stanza of Pema Chödrön here. As you can see, I've read and taught from this book a couple times, but there's only a couple times when I use 3 exclamation points with red and a star. And I think this is the first time I read it. I really enjoyed this stanza. I can tell you from experience that when there's a shift towards eagerness, life takes on a whole new meaning. Not the meaning that comes from careers or relationships, but the meaning that comes from using everything that happens as an opportunity to wake up. There will always be challenges, but they need not be seen as obstacles. It's all part of the path to enlightenment. And, I know we've kind of heard a version of this before, but this idea that like our eagerness and our enthusiasm for practice, for the path, like this will make everything in life that seems like an obstacle, in fact, like an ingredient for our waking up. It's just so beautiful. And then like a different kind of meaning, this opportunity to wake up. So now there are 3 kinds of laziness that he is saying here in this very short stanza. So heroic perseverance means delight in virtue, right? So we're kind of moving through with our delight in the goodness of what we're doing. And its contrary is laziness, which is kind of a funny word, but an inclination to unwholesome ways. So our first form of laziness is losing ourselves in comfort. Temporary yep. Cage is like, oh yeah. I know, I'm like, I know that one. I'm like, I could keep trying hard to wake up, or I could have this delicious chia pudding with, some podcast that means nothing and like lay on the couch, like create my own little bubble for a moment and just be, and I do not knock that. I think it's needed. We all need some healthy kind of restorative activities. But when we get lost in the discomfort, that's its own laziness. It's like this momentum. And it's funny because this is not a unusual area of inquiry in Buddhist practice. And in these traditional ways, we think of laziness as this, this indulgence, this kind of creature comfort. But I also think there's the laziness of being too busy and distracted, right? It's another form that it's not that we're losing ourselves in the comforts, we're losing ourselves in this ambition to do more, to get more, right? I think that's kind of a modern version of this laziness. And the second laziness is this laziness of despondency and discouragement. It's too hard. I've tried. So I resemble this comment. I can't believe I fell into another experience of overwhelming anxiety about something that actually didn't matter. Wow. Like, why didn't I remember my practice? This is so hard. Maybe I should just give up on practicing. Anybody? Right? Like it can, and you're just like, I'm done. Like it's hard. It's too hard, right? It's so difficult to keep sustaining my interest, my perseverance. So that's the kind of despondency. And then there's a third version, which is close, but it's the one of doubt and self-contempt. So the laziness of doubt and self-contempt. And this one is a bit more like all those other people, they're doing it right. I'm doing it wrong. And, I'm not sure I even know what it would be like to do it right. I don't know if I've ever done it right. So there's like this discouragement, like I've been trying and it isn't working the way I want. And then there's the like, I'm not good enough, essentially, those qualities. Curious, how does this land with you all, these forms of laziness, with my extra added bonus of the laziness of busyness? Yes. Do you,
I know, but if the people online can't hear you, then they're not.
I'm feeling pushback about the word laziness.
Yeah.
Because it feels like that all the things you described feel more fear-based.
Yeah.
Particularly fear-based from early childhood, things called lack of confidence,
Yep.
despondency,
yeah.
cocooning yourself in comfort for fear of continuing to attempt, fear of future rejection, anticipation. Why laziness when it just seems like it's actually what I'm going to call unprocessed pain of yesteryear that's engulfing you? Tell me a little bit more.
Doesn't
about
have quite the same ring, but I like it. What was it? Engulfing, one more time? What?
unprocessed pain of yesteryear, you know.
Unconscious pain of yesteryear.
un-
I like it.
It's unprocessed pain of yesteryear. That's what I mean. You're laying there on the couch saying, I'm stupid. And it's almost like your father's voice is there saying, when we just, it's not laziness, we sort of succumb to the beliefs of our childhood that
Yes.
still have a grip on some part of us. So
Yes.
maybe instead of why this, how about why laziness of all words?
I mean, I think and I agree, and it is a funny translation. However, I think you said the word that really resonates for me, which is succumb, right? Like there is conditioning, we are like entrained to these ways of being that we learn early in life that often we repeat or have more salient impacts on us as we grow up. And it's the succumbing. You give up on it. The laziness of, like a lot of these have a very kind of fear flavor, which might even be sitting on top of a sadness flavor, right? Yet are succumbing, are not bringing joyful enthusiasm. It is a kind of laziness, right? If we consider laziness isn't, I don't have things to do. It's I'm not doing them. There's a choice, right? And sometimes we think of lazy as like a character flaw as opposed to like a temporary state. But I think this is really pointing out that, we can become lazy in these ways we don't even recognize. We think we're just taking, like, but I'm, I had a hard day. I just gotta check out. It's like, okay, but check back in, don't, and like, I've been trying it's too hard. It's like, take a break, get back at it. I mean, I kind of, Shanti Deva is just like, he's kind of a hard ass. Like he's really always like pushing, like, get back at it. Like, what are you waiting for? So, but I appreciate the dissent, and I appreciate, what was it? Succumbing to early childhood wounding and patterning, unmetabolized pain, right?
Yeah, succumbing really helped me understand how it relates to laziness.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anyone else? Other kinds of loneliness you're willing to confess to, relate to, react to, reject? Yeah, Chris.
Well, I just really wanted to express my gratitude. I know we all have a lot of teachers and a lot of practices, and I've been listening to a lot of Bob Thurman recently.
Yeah.
And it was just, I wouldn't say intimidating. That's what it is. And not lazy, but avoidant, maybe? I don't know. Anyhow, I was just like, whoa, if I do not go get with my Sangha, I'm not going to have the courage to continue this on my own. So this has been a particularly beautiful meditation and gathering. And then I also wanted to say, not to diverge too much, but I think it's really interesting, and I'm feeling very hopeful about the fact that they are electing a new pope on the eve of the Buddhist full moon.
Hey, may it be so.
Which is Monday.
Which is Monday.
And we will be in Inverness on Sunday.
That's right. Celebrating, bringing that moon in. Any other confessions? Yes, Tom.
I appreciate, Maddie, you're talking about the laziness, and that sort of gives us sort of a weird ring, because it feels like it's sort of, we're setting, and I think this is just how I hear it, or we hear it in this culture. It's sort of like, the opposite of it is productivity.
Right.
And so that if you're, and a lot of the words that he uses are that kind of enthusiasm and virtue, and this all sort of very, feels very, I don't know, just sort of feels like a little bit toxic in the sense of like, get going, people, get back out there.
Yeah.
And when I think when I've seen people who I think are really are kind of with it in a awakened way, there isn't a sense of that. We got to go, we got to do it. But that there's this kind of a, whether it's patience or presence or whatever, but it doesn't feel like it's on that scale of lazy or enthusiastic or whatever. It feels like it's kind of a different dimension or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. Some of it is like the semantic quality of lazy being not productive, and, productivity being kind of this specter of judgment and self-contempt and valuation by a capitalist culture. But I think, this description here of open-ended inquisitiveness, because I think it's okay, we don't want to, overdo it. We don't want to underdo it. Like, can we just keep that open-ended inquisitiveness towards everything, when not shutting down? And I think, you see this quality with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, where like whatever is presented, there's like the same, like, this is good, well, this is good too. Like there's this kind of, flexibility, I would say, might even be another way of talking about that perseverance. There's an energy, but there's a flexibility.
I read about an encounter with him that I guess it was at a restaurant, a fancy restaurant in Switzerland or something, and there were some big shot donors at the table waiting to talk to him. But a waitress came up to him and asked him how, if he needed anything. But all of his attention was just focused on the waitress. Like she was the most important person in the world because she was in front of him, and the donors were kind of like, oh, we're getting impatient, and what's going on here? But I thought that was so beautiful, of the sense of like, I'm not interested in all of this hierarchical whatever. It's more like, this is what's in front of me, so it's the most important thing. And I feel like that's the only possible way you could, like when I think about enthusiasm in that way, if that just whatever's in front of me is what's the most important thing, then I feel like it doesn't have that kind of buzz, but it has the meat to it, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, good. And I like kind of problematizing it to make it feel applicable, and because I think, I think the joyful enthusiasm, I mean, you guys, especially those in the room, y'all showed up here, put your pants on, you got here, like, you got that joyful enthusiasm, right? Friends at home, you guys turned on your screen, you did it too. Like, we're all, you don't even need to. It's like we have enough, we are making it here, and we absolutely have to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. And it's hard. It's hard. I think, I've this despondency, discouragement one. Do people feel that on the path sometimes? Yeah. Like, let's talk about that. It's really hard, and it can be easy to be like, I'm just not going to do this. I think that even when I, in my head, say it's not working, what I'm really saying is, you're not doing it right, because I know it works. Like, I see the science, I see the people, like, I know it works. And it can be just so, like, tender, that piece. Yes, Maze.
I think, well, you know how I feel sometimes about this book. So I can really relate to the language of it, for me, feels shaming.
Yeah.
And so that's where like the collapse is in the like, you're bad, you're not doing something, right?
Yeah.
So that I can relate to. And in my work, I'm a high school mental health counselor. And when we're working with suicidal youth, like, it's almost always about shame.
Yeah.
So I think that in this culture, in this moment, 2025, that maybe like an understanding of shame helps. But then when you were talking about I was sort of thinking more about how, and I'm not a super Vajrayana scholar, but my wife is more, that these kinds of aspects are called encumberments.
Yeah.
And that there's an understanding that every person has sort of a natural tendency towards a particular kind of encumberment. Sometimes they call them defilements, which I have issues with. But like the other side of an encumberment, because everything is the path. So once you sort of just dust off the encumberment, it's a mirror towards enlightenment. So it's what does she call it? They call it enlightened qualities.
Yeah.
So if doubt, which you sort of bring up, is just my major encumberment, which I think is not unrelated to shame, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's one of the hindrances The other side of doubt is like joyful enthusiasm, right? It's like if you dust off the doubt and you work with the doubt in a really compassionate way.
Yeah.
And I was just listening to Tara Brach the other day, and she has this a talk and a meditation that I listen to over and over, where she's talking about you just say yes to whatever is there, sort
Yeah.
of like that. So saying yes to doubt over and over and over, it might not be joyful enthusiasm, but it is that perseverance.
Yeah.
Of like, just, okay, here's doubt, versus
Yes.
doubt means I'm bad and broken and therefore fuck the path. And then the last thing I'll say is that I think there's a misunderstanding I have, and I keep coming back to this over and over, that if it were working, then I would be happy all the time.
Right.
Right? So the equation in the American capitalist mind is if something's working, we feel, or I feel, no pain, no suffering, no difficulty, no problems at all. And that is wildly delusional.
Yes.
Therefore, like coming back to like that awareness of delusion and delusion and delusion and delusion, because
Yeah.
if it's working, then we're just seeing more and more clearly.
Yeah.
And enlightenment isn't necessarily a consistent state of a monotone joy. I mean, unless you're maybe the Dalai Lama, and I don't think he's very monotone.
No.
So, you know,
Yeah.
there's modulation there. Anyways, that's my monologue. for the day.
Yes,
Thank you.
Mace. Yes. And I really want to lift up a couple things, like this idea, the way I like thinking of it other than encumbrance is like the wisdom nature and the neurotic nature, right? So the wisdom nature of our doubt, could be also discernment, like how can I see clearly? I care what's important and I care what's in the way, but that to see that, these are not fundamentally bad aspects. And I hear you, like Shanti Deva does go for kind of a punitive approach, right? And he wrote this text for himself, which is interesting. And then when you read a lot of these 8th century texts and even, 10th and 11th century texts, there's a lot of self-denigration, that you're like, really? Like, you're like, I am a worthless, unintelligent fool. I may as well be covered in mud and feathers, but I'll offer these simple teachings to you. And there's like, a lot, and it is like a practice to help cut the egoic inflation. So this kind of like I'm going to call out, not call in, I'm going to call out my laziness so that I can see it, stop it. And I don't think that's a great fit for a culture where most people struggle with profound self-criticism and negativity. So it's kind of like, how do we take these instructions and help ourselves actually see clearly where we're stuck? And this discouragement and this despondency, which is probably wrapped up in a lot of those shame feelings, it is such a part of the path that we can get stuck in, such a part of the path that's difficult. And I think being able to kind of recognize, and not the laziness, and then I castigate myself as like a bad Buddhist, but, it's so, it's so relatable, like other people feel this too, because it is. It is really tricky working with these difficult habits of mind, long, like early unmetabolized pains that they just come back over and over. There was something else you said I wanted to pick up, but I lost it. It was beautiful. You were saying, and this this like essential importance of being able to recognize we are seeing more clearly, and that can make life seem harder and more difficult. Like when we see more clearly, we're like, wow, I am ruled by my frustrations. I cannot live without them. Oh my God, That's why we have to simultaneously develop so much compassion for ourselves and all beings. Because when we also see more clearly, we also see more clearly with the people in our lives. And it can be tricky, as we progress on the path and we see friends who are maybe engaging in habitual behaviors that create their own misery. And we were like, oh, have you heard of this book? you know, and like you can't really like impose on anyone your views. So you have to strengthen your compassion as you have that clear seeing, so you don't start to judge and like even look down upon people who are around you, which is tricky. Who sometimes feels that one. You're like, get like a little bit outside of the muck, just a little. And then you see someone in the muck and you're like, oh, mucky over there, right? Just like, I'm just a tiny bit less reactive than I used to be. So when I see your reactivity, it's, you know. So we really have to keep that compassion practice so strong, like that tenderness, that warmth. And yeah, it's interesting because I think sometimes we can learn these practices with such vigor, but without enough warmth. And they make you rigid and brittle and actually kind of judgmental. So I love you bringing that up too. Yeah, it's a good thing we're going to run out of time for the next section, because that's on next week. We need like one more, you know, in between to start looking at why remembering and reflecting on death is an important way to cultivate joyful enthusiasm, because there really is that essential nature of recognizing impermanence that kind of lights a fire under you, for sure. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you, everyone. Let's dedicate the merit of our practice together. So taking a moment and reconnecting with the breath and the body. Noticing, again, anything that is already pleasurable or enjoyable. Like strengthening that habit of finding what feels good. Considering the benefit of our shared time here together. Our thinking, sharing, our practice, and reflecting. Imagining that as a quantity of energy. And if it feels comfortable and natural, placing hands together in front of the heart. And symbolically offering this energy of our practice and reflection, dedicating it with this beautiful and outrageous aspiration that all beings could feel ease and peace. All beings could experience love and belonging. That all beings would know their true nature. That all beings everywhere could be free from inner and outer harms. That all beings everywhere could be completely and absolutely free. What a beautiful refuge to be here with you all. Thank you. Two small announcements. One, I do think in honor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday in June, we will start the book Beyond Religion, which we did 5 or 6 years ago. It's a short, beautiful read by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His birthday is July 6th. So it's a 1-month read. I am teaching a week-long retreat in Costa Rica on the 4 immeasurables. If you're interested, let me know, and I can send you the information.